Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Kevin Badu. Welcome, Kevin. Great to have you with us. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm good, and it's definitely great to be here. I'm fine, thank you. I've got a slight cold, so if I sound a bit groggy, apologies, but yeah.
Well, you've got a lovely bright yellow background behind you, so it's brightening me up today. Kevin is the head of sport at the Badu Sports organisation, a wide-ranging and arching London-based setup committed to uplifting people and empowerment through sport. Now, I've probably oversimplified and very much top-lined what Badu Sports is about there, but you're here, so there's no better way to talk about it than getting it directly from the horse's mouth. So I wonder if maybe you could tell us a bit more about the organisation, what you're about and what your role is there.
So there's two ways I'm going to kind of explain what we do at Badu Sports and who we are at Badu Sports. There's the corporate version, who my brother, who is the CEO, Nana Badu, would tell me off if I don't do, and then there's the street community version, which I'm also going to give to people. So essentially, we are an ecosystem that catalyzes systemic change through dynamic community inclusion. So what that means is we start off in the hub of the community. We support them with things that we believe they need, and also they tell us that they need. And then we use our network and our pool of corporates, people in higher up positions, let's say, and then we give our young people those positions and then opportunities to then thrive in those spaces, in those areas. So it's just exposing them to those things really early, so they have the opportunity to believe and dream and actually do those things that they want to do. Yeah.
How did it start?
It started in Hacknash's Park. So my brother had some balls, some cones, started delivering sports to local children, and then from there realised that he had a talent for it. So then he went into schools, offered these services for free. Started off in one primary school, and then through word of mouth, they were like, "Oh my God, we've got this guy in here who is amazing at, I don't want to say control children, but building relationships with children, and also delivering sport." Then from one school, it grew to 2 or 3 schools. From there, you'd have people within the school saying, "Oh, I've got a son who's just finished in college, university, that similar age to you or just a bit younger, that would love to do something like this." And it was all not paid. My brother and Josh, they were doing it off their own back, just something that they enjoyed. And then from there, it just grew through word of mouth. And then from the schoolwork, it then branched out to how can we support the community? Because again, the young people are in the schools. Their families don't necessarily know how to push their children into different areas. Especially people coming from our community, they look at sport as a pastime. You can't necessarily get a job out of sport unless you are the actual athlete. So from there, my brother was like, it's no longer just about the playing sports. There's a background here. There's things that can happen. Somebody could be a CEO or a COO of a company, or somebody could be a manager, somebody could be a coach, so on and so forth. So from there, it just grew, and then we are what we are today.
What about for you personally? I know that you've worked as a PE coordinator and a PE teacher and training PE teacher in those spaces. How did you come across to the organisation? Was it a case of my brother's made me, or where was your passion for it?
So for me, essentially, so it started off in secondary school for me. I was, I don't know, what do they call it, head boy, or I think head
Oh,
boy.
wow.
So I went to
Big Kev with the head boy badge here. Oh, okay.
Something of the sort. So I went to a sports college. So from about year 10, year 11, I just naturally, anytime in my free time, would go and help year 7s, year 8s. I really enjoy playing football and basketball. So I just go and help and just jump in the sessions, officiate sometimes. And I had a really good relationship with my PE teacher. I wasn't the best behaved pupil in school. I wasn't, not enough to kind of get excluded, but enough to be kicked out of the class, if that made sense. But he was always someone that was like, "Okay, bring your work, come and do it with me. Once you're done, we can do X, Y, and Z." So from there, from school, it was just like, I don't know what I want to do, but I know what I enjoy doing. So let me do what I enjoy doing. So anytime I wasn't in school, half terms, and I knew my brother was doing this, he was like, "If you come along and help, I'm going to give you a tracksuit." As a child, you don't mind a free tracksuit. So I would come in my spare time. If I finished school early after sixth form, it's a half term, I'd be down supporting young people. And then through there, I just kind of found a love for it, kept growing, built relationships with young people. Said I wanted a qualification, so I went to uni to study sports and exercise science. And then I started to discover, there's more to sport than just the coaching side. You could physio, so on and so forth. And that's the route I wanted to go down. But while doing that, again, anytime university wasn't, and I'd come back and then as I'd come back, the company was growing. We then started like a football section of the company. And football was my sport in terms of playing, but I hated coaching football. Um, and our first ever team, there were about 3 kids in the team who supported Spurs. I'm a Spurs fan myself, so built a bond with
It's all
them.
right, Kev. No one's perfect.
I don't know why I said it, but yeah, I built a bond with them, and they were a really good team. I think they were in year 2, year 3 at the time, and they had a tournament. They was invited to a tournament at Tottenham training ground, and none of the coaches wanted to go because they were all Arsenal fans. So I was like, well, I'll go. So from there, they ended up. I think we ended up coming second or third. From there, I said, oh, do you know what? I'm going to make it my mission to bring them here this season, do something. And I've literally been with them from year 3. They're in year 11 now, so they're back to their GCSE. So that's been my journey with them, and I've just stuck with Badu. I started working in the schools, and then yeah.
One thing I want to pick up on, I find it really interesting how many times I have conversations with people who work in sport at this level, the level that you work at and the level that I work at in sport, who quite quickly will admit that they were oftentimes disruptive in school. And I think a lot of the time we see that we were the ones who perhaps could slip through the gaps in educational environments. How much more important has it been to you then in your community, in communities perhaps where kids do fall by the wayside or get neglected anyway, to pick those kids up where sport actually really can be the avenue for them to unlock great potential and futures?
So I think it's massively important. One thing for us and me personally is trying to be the person that I needed when I was their age. Like I said, my PE teacher, Mr. Ancora, I still call him to this day. He tells me to call him his first name. I would never do it. Um, he's just been like really instrumental in just making me believe in myself when other teachers don't necessarily have that belief in you. So that's what I've done for the young people. I tend to just gravitate more so towards the ones that are disruptive or to get kicked out, and kind of make it like a personal challenge to get them back on track, get them back in the classroom, and then get them doing something they necessarily love. So that's just there. That's just been one of my major passions. But yeah, for them, I think just finding someone that looks like or thinks like them, comes from a similar background, that has a similar mindset, standing them, takes the time out to give them the love and care because they might not necessarily get it at home. Parents are working, they may have 3 or 4 other children. It's difficult to then give that person the time. So that's why I just kind of made it my mission to pretty much do that. It's difficult because you can't do it for everyone, but those that I can, I give it 100%.
You say it's difficult because you can't do it for everyone, but it's interesting when you read anything around Badu Sports, it's very obvious very quickly that the individual is really centred in the MO, in the mission statement of what the organisation's about, and also fun. What informs that? How is that something that's become your kind of mantra, your style as an organisation?
So for us, it was we're not here to rescue and save anyone. What we're trying to do is just put everyone on a level playing field. If we can get you to that level playing field and get you to believe that what you want to achieve is achievable, then it's ultimately a no-brainer. And again, to entice people, to get people to stay, you need to make it fun. As adults, if something's going to go back, so definitely for children, who are so much more easier to probably keep entertained if you've got stuff consistently going, and then also listening to their voices. So a lot of our activities and clubs we do is because the young people have said this is what we want. It's not us and them because we've had our time, if that makes sense. It's on them to know and understand what do they want to do. So some of our work, which we probably don't speak about enough, is centered around like.
Oh,
Apologies, sorry, I want to
oh,
move
that's all
back.
right.
Yeah,
That's all right.
a lot of our work is centered around tech. So we have like 9-year-olds who they don't want to play the sport, they enjoy it, but they come down, they'll bring their iPads. Now they're doing some video analysis and they're writing match reports for parents. So it's just something I'm looking at. I never would have wanted to do it as a kid or thought of that, but that's learning from them. So we learn as much as we can from them and almost take the take the credit for it. But yeah.
Something you said in that answer there, and actually something you said in the very first answer that you gave me, kind of really reminded me of what we talk about around the UN rights of the child and how it's our place to facilitate children's voices. We're not giving them a voice, they have a voice and we're here listening to it. Is that something that really resonates with you? Does that come from a place of perhaps when you were a kid, coming from a certain place and looking a certain way and perhaps being part of a smaller group in society, you didn't feel like you were being listened to, and actually that's what informs that passion now?
Yeah, 100%. I think I was fortunate and unfortunate. I think in school it was almost like, well, these are the 3 or 4 things you can do. because this is how you behaved, or your grade says this, and so on and so forth. But I think the fortunate side was at home, my mum was almost always like, well, that's not true. You can do absolutely anything you want to do. But you start to think it's easy to go, well, you're saying that you're my mum, you love me, so you should say that. And I think it's the same thing for these kids, but some of them don't necessarily have that. Sometimes some parents will go, well, 1, 2, and 3 jobs, doctor, lawyer, teacher, is going to guarantee you money. It's going to guarantee you if you go to university, you're going to get paid, you're going to have a house, so on and so forth. But sometimes that's not sustainable for someone that doesn't enjoy that. Sometimes it's really important to say, what do you enjoy? Are you gonna put 150% into it? Okay, cool. Let's support you any way we can. Come to our mentor group. Speak to people that are 5, 6, 7 years older than you that are currently doing it. What steps did they take? Don't listen, not necessarily have to come from me, who is 15, 20 years older than you. We can get our young people that have been through the Badu way or the Badu pathway that you can learn from and be mentored by. And then it's also speaking to parents and making them unlearn and then relearn. So I think a lot of our work, when we get the children through the door, is let's get the children through the door enjoying. But once the parents are in that room, let's speak to them about the next steps, what could happen in 4, 5, 6 years for that young person, and just open their eyes and broaden their horizons, because a lot of them don't get the opportunity to learn these things. Like I said, they're just consistently working. It's like a rat race. So if we can support them any way we can as well, just letting them know that there's a million things that you can do and there's no limit. Yeah.
How much do you feel like you're a conduit between parents and children at times? How much do you feel like you're hearing a voice from kids that their parents don't necessarily hear?
Um, every day. I've even had a conversation today, literally just before we jumped on. Um, so I understand sometimes, especially when we've got our, like, I think 13, 14 plus, where they're starting to think about what do they want to do next steps, or do they want to go to college or university. Um, I think the great thing for us is where we start at really young. We start from like 3 years old. We see these children from the very beginning all the way through. We're almost like another parent, depending on how much time you spend with them. Sometimes you might spend more time with the child than the parent does. Um, it's sometimes letting the parent know this is your child's personality. You necessarily don't know. You only see them in the morning when you say have a good time, and in the night when you say good night. So this is your child's personality, and if you're able to give X amount of time in here, this is what they're going to achieve. But they need this from you. So whatever sacrifices you need to make at certain points, please make it. Like, we know trying to earn to support you, but sometimes that doesn't have the correct effect, if that makes sense, that they're looking for. So, and then there's also letting the young person know, have your dream as well. But again, sometimes be realistic with your dream. I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but we have to have alternatives sometimes. Like, there's some children that, especially with sports, everyone wants to be the athlete, but not everyone will be able to be the athlete. It's a very limited pool. So just opening their eyes to, if this doesn't happen, because there's a possibility anything can happen, injury or your mind change, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, and this is how you take those steps, and then letting the parents know. So I think the benefit for us is those young people that come into the Badu way and want to be athletes, they see on the sport journey, not necessarily playing, but they coach at Badu, or they get a job at a sports agency, or they work for Adidas or whatever it is. It's just, yeah, it's just amazing to see.
It's really interesting that you brought that up, because that was going to be my next question to you. I was actually in a primary school on Tuesday, and that standard question that you ask small kids, what do you want to be when you're older? And the amount of them who say professional footballer, or, I mean, where I'm from, professional rugby player as well. And as an adult, you don't want to burst their bubble, but I'm also like, oh, it's really important that you work hard in school. How difficult is it to manage expectation in kids? Because, like you said, you don't want to ruin anyone's dream, and you don't want to discourage people, but you also want them to realise there's a big world out there. And actually, that big world does still remain in sport for a lot of people. Just because you're not going to be, the next big footballer, Harry Kane, for a Spurs reference for you there. You could still be somebody who's part of that story by being involved in sport.
I think at the really early stages, primary school ages up to about 11, 12 years old, I don't necessarily don't, or we try not to. Me personally, I don't burst their bubble. I just let them dream and believe, because we all want to dream and believe about Santa and so on. So let's do it. And again, it's still achievable. It's just very, very difficult. But when you get into the 14, 15, 16, and you, like, as a coach, and it's like in talent development as well, you kind of realize that, very far away from what the pool is for that sport. it's then having those conversations and saying to them, dream, because anything can happen. You could, Jamie Vardy became a professional footballer at 30 or 28 or 29, whatever it was. It's happened, but it's a lot more difficult than you think it's going to be. So what we tend to do is from 15 years old onwards, that's where our mentoring groups kind of form and come together. And then we just expose them to that they never even thought of. We're fortunate enough to have Martin Tyler, the commentator, who's one of our patrons. He will come down and do a talk, and they don't necessarily know what he looks like, but when they hear the voice, they're like, "That's like the guy from FIFA." We're like, "Yeah, it's him." So then he'll talk about what it is to be a commentator. And during the lockdown, some of the young people got to do like some workshops with him where they learn how to commentate. Then you've got people saying, "I want to be a commentator now," when no one would have ever even imagined what it is to be a commentator. And then you've got people wanting to be sports lawyers at 16 and so forth when all they thought about was football. They just didn't know that these things existed. So yeah, I think you expose them to that as early as possible, but not too early where it doesn't burst their bubble.
No Vardy, no party. No Badu, no party.
Love it.
If you could extend the Badu way more nationally, more internationally, what do you think are the main things that you'd want others to take from the organisation as learnings? What are the things that are stamped on the heart of Badu that you want everybody to adopt?
So I think first of all the child-centered approach, learning from the young people. Um, there's a saying that we've got in Ghana. My brother says, and he's gonna kill me when he listens to this. He's like, you're not saying it right, but it's almost, it's something about children have been here before, so we learn from them basically. The next generation are always going to know what's best, if that makes sense. What's coming? They're currently learning. We've not necessarily saying we've finished learning, but we've learned old. They're learning new. We need to take the old, mix it with the new, and then we can push on, and then the generation could do that. So I'd want people to do that. I'd also want people to start with community first, because the most underserved are going to know what is best for everyone. If we look at what the top needs, always forget about the people at the bottom or in the middle. If we start in those spaces, it's always going to support what's next, what's coming. Um, Again, fortunately for us, we've just started and launched. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it, but you've got exclusive Badu Ghana. So we're starting a Badu Africa. So we're starting off in Ghana because that's where we're from. During the Christmas time, we've got a hamper give back, which is called That Moment When, where we give X amount of families. This year we did 350 families, like traditional offers and gifts for how many people are in the family. And we did our first initiative this year in Ghana. And we've also started with some like coach training because we're trying to have two football teams and then turn it into basically what we've got here over there. But again, it's a process, but that's our aim.
One of the things that you've talked about is community, and knowing that it started kind of Hackney Marshes originally for Badu, I do want to pick up on London 2012, and that might seem a bit weird, but I always regard those kind of flashpoints in sport as being important. How important was it in an area like that? We talk about Olympic fever all over the UK when the Olympics was hosted here, but it was specifically hosted in East London. Do you think that those communities were underserved after the Olympics? Were they the people who were forgotten, even though they're the people who were the most local to it?
100%. So I worked in Gainsborough Primary School. It's a stone's throw away from the Olympic Village. You can see everything from the school. Um, and there's still some children, probably 18, 19 now, that have never been to the Aquatic Centre. They've never been to the Velodrome. They've never had an opportunity to play tennis there. And it's like, that's crazy. That's on your doorstep. You should have first to have access to these things. You should have been the first to meet the athletes, so on and so forth. You should be working in those spaces now because you've come that. So what we've tried to do is bridge the gap in between the two. And I think we've a decent enough job, and we're still working on it. We're launching the swimming program now in the aquatic centre in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're then going to bring people from the community to then start learning swimming in there because we in just before Christmas again we did a community swim day. We managed to get 65 people from the black and brown people from the community to come and swim. Who can swim, can't swim, so on and so forth. And so many of them was like, oh my god, I've walked past it so many times, and I just didn't think it was for me just because it's hasn't been invited enough. So I think that's pretty much our job, trying to just bridge the gap in between the two, and then just let people know that it is for you, it's for everyone. But yeah, and it's also letting the people know that run those spaces. This is how you kind of marry the two together. You can't just put something and expect people to come. You have to hear from them. What do they need? What do they want? And what's the best way to get them through?
How important is it for sports organisations in terms of governing bodies and teams to recognise that whilst they can talk about legacy after events and the idea of if you build it they will come, for certain communities and for certain more deprived areas or certain groups of people in society, they will need more coaxing. They won't just come and invite themselves, they will need an invitation. How important is it that we are reaching out to more people so that we are increasing the bandwidth of our sports in the UK?
I think it's super important. It's probably the most important because they're going to be the next generation of athletes, practitioners, people that are potentially working in those spaces. And I think what people forget is in order for people comfortable in a space, you need to build a relationship. So you need to go first into the community, build the relationship in the community, gain the trust of the people, trust them all, and then invite them to those spaces. And I think a lot of people see it as our people are in these communities. It should be free. Let's put it on for. Sometimes it feels like charity. People don't want to go. So one thing we don't do, of course, we have some free spaces X, Y, and Z, but this is free because you're in this area. Because then it looks like I don't want to be there. I can pay for it. I want to pay for it. I want to feel valued. That's what people want to feel valued. So then again, like it's bringing them to those spaces and then just supporting them through those spaces. What do we need from there? How can we learn from you to then build and grow and grow?
Kevin, this has been an absolutely amazing conversation. It's been so incredible to learn more about Badu, and I can't wait to see what happens with Badu in Ghana and obviously everything around the UK and London. So thank you so much for joining us today. You've been a great guest.
You're welcome.
And we'll speak to you again soon. And thank you for listening at home. We hope you've enjoyed. If we've piqued your interest in our coaching catch-ups, head to the website for more info on how you can get involved in those. And that's at www.playtheirway.org. And as always, there are plenty of other free resources available on the website too. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. And follow Play Their Way on social media at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.